Hi, folks. Welcome to the Victor Vicente podcast. In the second episode, I will be talking to Garry Craig Powell. For those who don't know him, Garry is a British writer based in Portugal and the author of two great books, Stoning the Devil and Our Parent to Art in Heaven, inspired by the time he spent in the UAE and in the US, respectively. Like myself, he also lived in Spain and Poland. I reckon we have a lot in common. Stick with us to find out. I hope you will enjoy this episode, and I would be very grateful if you would subscribe to my channel and also press the like button below. I see you in a sec. Welcome to the podcast, Garry. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here too, and honored.
Thank you. Thanks again. So, you were in England recently. As I recall, you returned to Portugal a week ago or so, but you left, like, I don't know, around this, I think it was in the 80s, if I remember well, but you can correct me. So, since then, who changed the most? Was it you or the country?
Oh, I think the country. The country has changed massively since I was a young man. In so many ways, we have a very large immigrant population now, which we didn't really have when I was a young man. I mean, there were certainly immigrants when I was young, but for example, there was no city which had a majority immigrant population when I was young, whereas now most British cities have majority immigrant populations. London, for example, has well over 60% non-white British people. So that's one enormous change.
Yeah.
There's been a real erosion of British values, I would say, to British people. I think it's fair to say have lost a sense of direction. I think they've lost a sense of who they are. There's a lot of guilt about the past, not just on the left either. You know, I think on the right as well. I think that's a kind of general thing. And because of that, there's a sense that the country is falling apart. I mean, it's been very much misgoverned as well for decades, I would say, by both parties. So in many respects, it's a much, if I say it's a much worse country, that will make it sound as if I'm against immigration, which, you know, I'm not against legal immigration, actually. I think we need a certain amount of that. I am very much against illegal immigration. But yeah, in general, I think the country is not going in a good direction. And yeah, I mean, I've changed as well, obviously, though I feel that my core personality is not so different.
What did you keep?
Well, I've always had a very strong connection to England, you know, and it's a bizarre thing, actually, because I haven't really lived in England as an adult, but I have this very strong connection to the land. to the nature. I think England has this very remarkable mystical sense, almost of this very, very close spiritual relationship of the people with the land, and mythology with the land, which I know happens a lot in Ireland too. And I've always loved the English countryside, and still do. I've always loved the architecture, the history, and still do very, very, very much. And it saddens me very much when I see it threatened. There's still a lot more of it has been preserved than you might think, and in some ways the British are quite good at preserving that, perhaps better than the Portuguese, actually. But yeah, I mean, I would say that I've remained a strong lover and admirer, really, of English, not just English, but British culture and tradition, and the British essence, whatever that is.
Do you think that would have changed if you would have remained in England, or it is not related to the fact that we are abroad for a few decades?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I would have kept that, actually. Possibly the fact that I've been in this sort of semi-exile, self-imposed exile, I suppose, for so long, may have made me more nostalgic, perhaps. But no, I think I would have always felt that. I mean, the things I loved when I was a teenager, I still love now. And some of my friends still love as well. English people are different from most Europeans, I think, in that most European intellectuals, I think, want to live in cities. I mean, they certainly do in Portugal. And in England, it's not like that. Everybody wants to get out of the city and live in the country. Everyone wants to be a country gentleman. And you can probably see I'm wearing a tweed jacket. This is the traditional dress of the English gentleman, although it's made in Scotland.
But it suits you. It suits you very well.
Thank you. So yes, I think that I think I would have kept that. Yeah, I've always wanted to live in the country, in an old house. I can remember when I was a teenager, I thought I would not have a car when I was older. I wanted to have a horse, and that would be my means of transport. I haven't managed that, but perhaps I still will.
Well, it's still possible. I think there are a few horses around the village where you live, so I wouldn't be surprised if next time there's a horse behind that door.
Well, there are horses next door, actually. My neighbors have 2 or 3 horses, and there's actually an exercise yard. What do you call it? Picadeiro, I think, in Portuguese. Is it picadeiro? Yeah. Right behind my garden. Yes, that's true.
So you mentioned when you were a teenager, thinking you would end up living in an old house, but life turned out slightly different. So I think you moved probably in your 20s, if I'm correct. And can you tell me why did you move, and what happened, if there was a why? Because sometimes we cannot describe exactly what happened. It's not always that objective. So why did you leave England, and what was the driving behind it?
Well, obviously, after I left university, I needed a job. There kind of was a reason, at least initially. My big hero at the time was Hemingway, and so
that's a very good reason for adventure.
yes, exactly. And I suppose it's a typical young man's model. I wanted to have the same sort of adventurous life that Hemingway had, and I actually went first to Spain, which was, of course, what Hemingway's great love really was Spain. So yeah, initially, I started teaching English as a foreign language, not really out of choice, but simply because it was a way to make a living and manage to survive while I was abroad. You didn't have all of this online work then. Really, teaching English was the main thing that you could do at that time, and I got sort of sucked into that. I never liked it very much, actually, but within a couple of years, I had married a Portuguese girl.
In Spain or in Portugal?
In Portugal, and we got married in Santarém, actually, which is, as you know, is not just Portugal, but really the very heart of Portugal, I would say, or was then anyway. The Ribatejo was a very traditional area, an area where bullfighting was very, very popular. For example, where they bred bulls, and we used to have the Portuguese cowboys, the campinos, coming through town with the steers quite frequently, and big agricultural fairs and so on. Bull running in the feira, the fair. So very, very traditional place. So yeah, I got sucked into it, and by the time I was 26, I had a child, James, whom you know, and then I had to keep working. It took me a long time to get out of teaching English.
Yeah, I thought it took a long time to understand that you need to work, because I'm 40 and I'm still processing that idea. It's not getting any better. Maybe I need to ask some advice around. I don't know if you are the right person to ask or not, but I really need someone to mentor me on that. But let's stay on your trajectory for now. So you left with an objective reason. So there was a job on the horizon. Then you settled somehow. So you got married to a local woman. A child was born. So was there anything you were missing back then from England, or you just turned the page?
No, I missed England quite a bit, and those first few years in Portugal, we were quite poor, actually. My wife didn't work, and teaching English has never been a very well paid job. So, and the sort of very cheap flights which you have now, Ryanair and so on, they didn't exist. So it was quite expensive to travel. So for years, I didn't go back to England, actually, and I missed it a lot, and thought about going back to live, making a permanent move back, which I kind of regret not doing. Actually, I think I probably should have done that, but I didn't. So yeah, I used to miss the things I said, the countryside, the culture. I think one of the things you miss most as an expat is, especially in those days when there were not many expats in Portugal. In fact, I was usually either the only or almost the only foreigner in town, wherever
So you were somehow an attraction.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I was more of an oddity, I would say. You know, I mean, I have to say, Portuguese people are fairly, in one sense, they're very welcoming. That they're pleasant, but they don't usually really accept you as one of them. So, you know, I found it difficult to make friends. I always known lots of people. I got to speak Portuguese fairly well and fairly quickly, but I found it difficult to make friends. You know, I'm a bit of an eccentric, I suppose, a bit of an oddball, and I suppose I find it difficult to make friends anyway. People often find me a bit difficult. I mean, I'm not really an unpleasant person. I don't think. But I suppose my views are very different from most people. My interests are very different from most people's.
Yeah, that for sure matters when it comes to build friendships, or have people around. Like, you will have your own niche, and then you're going to develop your network in that niche. You might have a few good friends, but not a lot, which I think it's not a bad thing. I think when talking about friends, we want to prioritize quality over quantity. So
yes, absolutely.
It's not a bad deal. So you are still in your 20s, living in Portugal, and I think at some point you moved to, was it Spain or was it Poland? What was first?
No, well, it's really complicated because I've been all over the place some of the journeys were not that long. So I went to Spain first, then had a year in Portugal, then another year in Spain, then back to Portugal. I didn't go to Poland until in my mid to late 30s. I did a master's degree in England, in Durham. I went back for about 18 months then. And after that, I got a job in Poland, in Gdańsk.
Yeah.
I was only there for 6 months, though. I liked it a lot. It was very interesting. And
why were you this fascinated with Gdansk? Is it because the culture was very different from what you were used to in England and in Portugal? Was it the presence of the sea? What was it, the people, or a bit of everything?
I think all of those. I mean, do you know Gdansk? I can't remember.
I've been there. I've been there twice, only for weekends.
Yeah,
but I've been
well,
there
it's
twice.
a very beautiful city, as you know. It's a Hanseatic city. It actually looks more Dutch than Polish because it was built by Dutch merchants, basically in the 16th century. So, I mean, it looks more like Amsterdam actually than it looks like other Polish cities. But it's very beautiful, and the nearby town of Sopot is wonderful as well. I loved that.
And I think there is one more. As far as I remember, they call it the Tree City, which is
Gdynia.
Yeah.
Which is where Solidarity and Lech Wałęsa came from, and that was really the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. I like the Poles. I'm a big fan of the Poles. The Poles are very, very, very impressive people. Probably the most intellectual people I've come across. That a colossal number of them seem to be formidably educated, and they often have this extremely impressive range of interest, and you find quite ordinary people doing just amazing things. For example, one of the secretaries in the school I worked at played cello in a string quartet, and she was very good. And everyone I seemed to know seemed to be, they were in bands, or they were acting or painting or writing, or there was a ferment of cultural activity. The Poles were the best students I ever had.
In your whole life?
In my whole life, I think. Yeah. I mean, they worked so hard. You never had any discipline problems. They were extremely intelligent, extremely motivated. I mean, a real joy to teach. I don't think I've ever had such a good experience with any students.
Actually, that resonates with what my sister mentions about students coming from different parts of the world, which is more and more a thing in Portugal. So we have, like, let's say, three different main sources of foreign students. We have the Eastern Europeans, there are Polish, Moldovans, Romanians, and others. Then we have people coming from the Portuguese speaking countries, from colonies, Angola, Mozambique, Brazil, and others. And then we have a new wave coming from India, Bangladesh, Nepal. And your comments really echo what my sister mentions about the Eastern Europeans, the discipline, the fact that they put interest and passion and dedication to the work, the respect, plus the intellect. They have really, really intelligent, and they care. And I think altogether that makes a good student.
Yes. Yeah. There was, I was in Gdansk from, let's see, when was it? It was 1993. So it was not long after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And there was this very exciting sense at the time that the world was opening, everywhere actually, but especially in those Central European countries, there was a tremendous optimism. Life was still difficult. Poland was still quite poor at the time, poorer than Portugal it would have been at that time, actually. And people's lives were still quite difficult, but they were very, very optimistic. There was just a buzz, there was a kind of air of excitement, which was really, really kind of thrilling in a way. So yeah, I was very impressed with Poland, actually.
So were you finally an attraction in the good sense of it?
Yes.
Yeah, I was waiting for that moment. After being an oddity in Portugal, at least you were an attraction in the midst of the optimism. So yeah, I think many people will be jealous of that opportunity. Right person in the right time. Yeah, and Gdansk is, like, other than that, Gdansk is beautiful. I recommend the audience to visit. It's not a big city, so people can go, say, for a long weekend. Just walk around in the old town. The architecture is stunning. Then the sea is just a few meters away, so you can simply walk, sit there with a glass of wine or a coffee, whatever you want to drink. And it's cheap in comparison to the Nordics or Amsterdam. So I think it makes and it's not exploited by tourism, like, say, Krakow maybe is, or Amsterdam for sure is for quite some time. So yeah, Gdansk is it's a fantastic city. I think it's a city. It's probably a city by now.
It's a city. Yeah, it has 750,000 people actually.
3/4.
Yeah. Well, the Tri-City does. No, yeah, I can't remember I think it's about 750,000. It's fairly big, actually.
Okay, so you were also in Spain, but I think it was, were you there only for 1 year and then going back to wherever you were, or did you stay for a bit longer?
No, well, I was there for 2 periods, each one for 8 or 9 months, so a total of about a year and a half.
And where in Spain was that?
Leon,
Leon, yeah.
initially, which was once the capital of Spain, in the
Yeah.
early medieval period, the kings of Leon. And then in Galicia, in Pontevedra and Villagarcía de Arosa. So not very far from where I live now, actually, in Minho, in the north of Portugal. In
Yeah, I'd
fact,
say, yeah.
sorry.
I said that. Sorry, I said there are two very different places, Leon and Pontevedra. Because
Yes, very different. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, Pontevedra is Galicia. So for those of your viewers who don't know anything about it, Galicia is a Celtic country. And the people there don't regard it as a region; they regard it as a country, much like Wales or Scotland. They have their own language, Gallego, which is very similar to Portuguese, actually. They play bagpipes. The mythology is very similar to Irish, Welsh, Scottish mythology. It has a very different feel from Leon, yes.
did you feel closer to home when you were in Pontevedra? Because as I remember, you have some Welsh ancestors.
Yes, I did a bit. I mean, it's very wet,
Yeah.
like Wales and Ireland, are very green.
Mm.
So yes, physically it's much more like the countries of the Celtic fringe of the British Isles than central Spain is. So yeah, I did to some extent. I wasn't there long enough really to get to know it terribly well.
Mm. Yeah, because yeah, at some point you settled where you are on the northern part of Portugal, so not that far from Pontevedra. I think the landscape it's not that different from Galicia. So the green fields, the weather, also the culture. So you end up settling yourself on the very north of Portugal, which is actually quite the opposite of what most British people do. They end up in Algarve. So it's quite ironic. If not Algarve, maybe Cascais. It's mostly Algarve. I have to say that as a Portuguese person, I only been to Algarve 3 times. And this can be fact checked. I've only been to Algarve 3 times, and it was always when I was flying back from Ireland. So for some reason, I flew to Faro. Probably was the time of the flight or some budget reason. So I end up staying in Algarve for a few hours. Never been to the water in Algarve, which is unbelievable for a Portuguese person. So I tend to joke here in Ireland that there are some Irish people who know the Algarve better than me. And maybe you also know Algarve better than me.
No, I've only been there once actually. I went there Christmas 1980, I think, with a girlfriend from England, and who was visiting me in Portugal, actually. And I can't remember how long we spent there, maybe a week. And I already thought it was spoiled then, and I know it's much more spoiled now. So I've never been back.
Well, the fact that you didn't return, I think it tells a lot. That it wasn't the most pleasant experience. I don't know if it was about the girlfriend or not, but
no, it wasn't because of the girlfriend. Really, no, not really. No, that's just reminded me of a funny story. At the time, I was trying to go out with a girl who was a student at the school I was working at, and I was getting her quite interested in me. But and she had actually agreed to give me a date after Christmas. And in the meantime, the English girlfriend came to visit me, and the secretary of the school told the girl that I was interested in. And so when I saw her after the Christmas holiday, the first thing she did was hit me across the face. And I said, "What's that for?" And she said, "Well, you've seen another woman." So that was an object lesson in Portuguese feminine jealousy.
And that was way before Tinder. So,
Yeah.
so the people would know it was possible to have multiple girlfriends before the advent of these dating apps.
Yeah.
Right. Let me get to your books. And we'll start with Stoning the Devil. So, Stoning the Devil is a collection of short stories happening in the UAE, where you lived for a few years. So, that was not as short as Spain. You were there teaching English in Abu
Yes.
Dhabi.
Not just Abu Dhabi. I spent 5 years at the National University in Al Ain, actually, United Arab Emirates University, which was very different because it was a desert city, an oasis city, actually, in the middle of the desert. So very, very hot, very dry, completely different climate from Abu Dhabi. And then I spent 3 years in Abu Dhabi on the coast, where it's extremely humid. So,
yeah.
So I spent 8 years in the Emirates altogether.
Yeah, 8 years. I'd say it's quite a lot, because I think especially back then the UAE was not as entertaining as it is now. I was there in September, and one thing I have to say is what you just referred, the weather. Like, for me, was unbearable. The levels of humidity, man, I couldn't leave the hotel room until maybe 4 p.m. I just couldn't. It was really, really too much for me. So the humidity and the heat, like I couldn't stand it. And there was all this heat, but you couldn't see the sun, which to me that's more necessary than the heat itself. So I really hated the weather. But talking about your book, how much of your personal experience is reflected in the book?
Well, I mean, it's not autobiographical, but there are autobiographical elements. The publisher described Colin, the main English character, as an alter ego. I suppose it's true that he's an alter ego, which means a sort of alternative ego in a sense, but Colin is not really me. There are things which Colin does. For example, Colin sleeps with a prostitute, which is something I've never done in my life. Colin is married to an Arab woman, which I've never done either.
It's still possible. With the amount of Arabs coming to Portugal, it's still possible.
Possible, unlikely, I would think. But I mean, you know that when you write fiction, obviously, I think your concerns end up in the book. You know, the things that you are worried about and that obsess you all end up in the book, but the characters may not necessarily reflect your own life. Many of those incidents in the book did actually happen. I mean, either to people that I knew, or some of those stories. We'll just explain for people who haven't read the book, which will be nearly everybody. that
I'm an exception, and I'm proud of that.
thanks. It's a collection of stories, but they're linked stories, so that the characters, someone who is a major character in one story, for example, might be a minor character in another, and that there's a sort of network of relationships. So most of these characters know each other. They don't all know each other, and they're all in one way or another linked with Colin. Actually, Colin is the sort of thread that goes through them, and there's a kind of overarching plot, although there's a plot to each story. And some of those stories were inspired by articles in newspapers, actually. So they were actually based on true stories. For example, the story Sentence, which is about public execution, that did actually happen. And it happened in Al Ain, the city I lived in. In the story, Colin is an actual witness. He's there and he sees it and he's reporting on it for a newspaper. Actually, in reality, I didn't see it. I only read the report. So that it was written entirely, well, almost entirely, let's say, from the imagination, although it was based on truth, and that was true of a number of the stories, actually. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, you can carry on.
Well, I was going to say, what unites the stories really is a concern for the lives of the women there, really, and this is why the book has been very much praised in the feminist press. The most of the characters in the book are Arab women. Actually, there are a couple of Emirati women who are students at the university, and there are some Lebanese refugees who are actually, well, when I say Lebanese, they're really Palestinian. They've grown up in the Lebanese refugee camps on the outskirts of Beirut, and they've moved to the Emirates. So it was really, to a large extent, an investigation of the lives of Arab women. And people have this, or at least they certainly used to have this idea, that Arab women were very submissive, let's say, and very oppressed, and they had no freedom at all. And I was very struck, because I worked on a women's campus, at how resourceful the girls were, actually, and how very strong and assertive many of them were, and how clever often they were in subverting the rules. Of course, in ways that were very unfamiliar to most Western women, and sometimes they do things which Western women would not regard as feminist at all. But
like what, for instance? Can you name an example or two?
Yeah, I think I can. So, for example, they will find ways to attract men, or sometimes women, because there's quite a lot of bisexuality, in ways which I think Western women would often find manipulative and a little bit dishonest. it's what they've got, So, okay, let's give you one or two examples. So, as you know, they're supposed to be covered up all the time, pretty much.
Yeah.
They wear these long dresses, floor length dresses, and over those they wear something called an abaya, which is it's like a cloak, and on their heads they wear a scarf which they call a shayla. They're not necessarily veiled, at least on a university campus, for example. Only about probably 10% of them are actually veiled. The rest show their faces, but they have their hair covered. So you might think that it's very difficult for them to show their charms to a man, but they have lots of sort of clever wiles for example, it's considered shameless to show your arms, so they wear these long sleeve dresses, but they're allowed to show a bit of cleavage, actually. So they sometimes have quite low cut tops. And for example, I found that, for example, girls would often find an excuse to sort of stoop in front of me, and I'm sure that the idea was to show me their cleavage. Another thing they would do is, for example, we used to have these shutters on the windows, and if I was going to show them a film or something, I would close the shutters so that it was darker. Well, I remember one girl insisting that she did it, and so she jumped up on a chair, and then as she reached up, of course, her dress rode up, and I feel sure that she was showing me her legs, So that there were lots of things like this. The girls would frequently leave us presents. They would leave us presents of flowers, and I would get chocolates and little flirtatious notes.
And is that something that they would do with Westerns, or also with the Emiratis and other?
No, they certainly didn't do it with Emiratis, I don't think, and I don't think they usually did it with other Arabs. I think it was mainly with Westerners.
Yeah. Otherwise, it could end up very, very bad. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it was a kind of a dangerous thing to do anyway, and girls who did that were often gossiped about and called bad girls. They use that phrase, bad girl. And it rarely, I won't say they never overstepped the bounds into an actual physical affair, because I do know of I know of several cases of that happening, actually, but obviously that was very dangerous, both for the girl and for the guy involved, and it usually didn't go beyond flirtation.
And if you to turn to something physical, what would be the repercussions, let's say, for the Western men? Deportation?
Well, I think that would be the best you could hope for. Yeah, I think. I think you'd probably go to prison, actually, if they caught you. I did know. I think I knew 3 guys that did it, and they all got away with it. One of them actually.
And how did they manage to get away? Was there a bribe, or
no?
Did they know someone?
One guy I knew actually eloped from the country with a girl and married her. He married her Turkey, I think. No, in Cyprus, on the Turkish part of Cyprus. They had to leave on separate planes, but they actually managed to do that. Another one had an affair with not an Emirati girl. I can't remember where she was from, Jordan or Syria or somewhere like that. And he actually got her to come to his house. It was extremely risky. I mean, very, very foolish, actually. And I think they were just lucky. And actually, most girls couldn't leave the campus. So, I mean, only the foreign girls were allowed to leave the campus. So it would have been extremely difficult to. I mean, it was just very difficult to manage. It might be a little bit more liberal now. I suspect. I know it's always been a bit more liberal in Dubai anyway. That the Dubai girls have more freedom than the girls in the other Emirates. I mean, even then in the 90s and early 2000s, I think most of the Dubai girls could drive, and most of them were getting jobs on graduating, which was still not the norm at the time in the other Emirates, though I suspect that that's changing. There are some very successful Emirati businesswomen now. I mean, as you probably know, I'm not sure if it's still true, but the woman who ran Emirates Airlines, was a very important businesswoman, actually.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's a woman running
Yeah.
the show.
It certainly was. Yeah, the CEO was a woman. Yeah. So
that's a surprise.
But the country has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, actually, when I was there in September, there were a couple of positive things I came across. I was really fascinated by how people are still decent. And what I mean by that is mutual respect. Families and groups of friends who sit at the same table without drinking, and I have no issue with alcohol, as you know. I live in Ireland and I enjoy Irish culture very much, but I also admire the idea of civilization that they preserve. So they don't need to degrade themselves to have fun. They can do that any time of the day. There's no need to, some shady place or some strange lights or something nasty happening for people to have a good time. They can just sit at the table, eat, and have a chat, and it's a time that everyone is enjoying. So that's probably a lesson that we Westerns should take. Of course, we don't need to mimic everything they do, but there are some aspects that I think they are a good example.
Yeah, family life, I think, is still important, and community. There's still a sense of community there too, which I think we are losing in most Western countries.
Yeah, talking about the West, at some point you moved to the US, which I hope I'm not wrong, because your life is very difficult to follow. And of course, I cannot talk much in that regard because mine is not that straightforward either. But at some point you moved to the US also with the purpose of teaching.
No, not initially. No, I went there. I went there initially to do a degree, actually, in creative writing. I did an MFA in creative writing at the University of Arizona.
But did you end up teaching creative writing or?
Yes, I did, but not initially. I mean, this is complicated too. Immediately after I did that degree, I went back to the Emirates. But after 3 more years in the Emirates, I went back to the States. At this point, I was married to an American, actually, from the South, from Arkansas. And we moved to Arkansas. My American friends often feel sorry for me when I say that, but
Why is that? What's the issue for an Englishman to living in that part of the US, or for a foreign?
Well, I'm sure you know that the States is very polarized, and the people on the coasts who tend to be liberal, progressive, whatever you want to call it, they tend to have, at best, a patronizing attitude to the people from the South and the Midwest, what they call the flyover states. I mean, their attitude is that there's really nothing to see between the coasts, so you just fly over them. And of course, well, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about Trump, but the heartland that is where Trump has got most of his support. So there's this idea that everyone in the South and the Midwest is a kind of redneck, uneducated person, and that only uneducated people will support.
So are they on the antipodes of California?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I would say they are sort of the antipodes of California and New York. Yeah. I mean, as always, these polarized ideas are oversimplified. In fact, if you live in Arkansas, you find, for a start, the cities in Arkansas are not even very conservative. I mean, Little Rock consistently votes Democrat, for example. So this idea that all Arkansans are right wing is absurd. And the town I lived in, Conway, which was a university town, was extremely liberal too.
And that is reflected in the book, in the novel, very much.
Yes.
If I think about the students and the challenges that the main character was facing, not only at work, but also I think with the wife and some neighbors and some folks all over the place. So I think that's reflected in your first-hand experience.
Yeah. And I mean, personally, I suppose because, like you, I'm a man of the people. I'm from a working class background, and I don't like it when people put down working class people, especially when they don't even know them. So I when Hillary Clinton referred to the people of the South as the deplorables, I was very shocked by that, and I thought she deserved to lose the election, although I didn't necessarily support the person who did win it. I didn't support him, actually, but I think I don't think they're deplorable. I think that the people in the South and the Midwest are rightfully angry at the fact that their needs are ignored on the coasts. And I think the solution they've come up with is the wrong one, personally, but I think it's understandable that they're in revolt, and I think until the elite understands why they're in revolt, the country will remain divided. But I don't think actually that working people in America are nearly as stupid as the elites think. I think they understand what's going on far better than they're given credit for. And I have to say, having lived among Southerners who are often, very conservative in ways that I'm not. I mean, most Southerners would be belong to, the Baptist Church, for example. Usually fair evangelical churches. I mean, very, very conservative people often. But I have to say that most of them are really good people, and that this idea that they're all nasty and just love their guns and love violence, it's just not true at all. Sure, they have their guns, they live in the country and they hunt, and they've grown up in a country where there was often the presence of the law was not always felt, and you often had to be able to defend your family with your own gun, and that's part of their tradition. But my feeling is that most of these people are good, decent people, actually, and it's a pity that the coastal elites don't make a much greater effort to understand them.
No, I absolutely agree with your comments. They tend to be ignored. Their thoughts are not taken in consideration. They are somehow downgraded to subhumans, and that's totally wrong. They have the right to have their say. Sometimes they can come up with correct comments, or not that much informed, but doesn't matter. They must have a say, whether it makes sense or not. It's just a matter of respecting everyone's thoughts, ideas, and set of values. So they certainly deserve their own space. But I tend to think, what can we do to bring them to the arena, that they can have a voice? I'm not sure if the university is the right place, because they are not around. They are probably finding other avenues. Somehow the academia, in my opinion, is taken by the elites, as you just mentioned. They are linked. There is this confluence between different institutions, the media, the academia, the corporations, and they all act together, and they tend to neglect the let's say the common person. There's no real space for them. When you were talking to the students, because they are going to be the ones who will take the lead in the future, did you see any signs of hope among the madness? Because I know we all agree that there is a lot of nonsense. It's difficult to identify some ray of light where we can perceive the change. Was there anyone stand out where you can say, maybe this person can somehow balance the way things are going?
Yeah, I certainly saw some students who gave me hope. I couldn't say it was the majority. I think I should say I left the university in 2017, and I think things have got a lot more extreme since then. But even then, I would say most students conformed for the sake of getting good marks, and they wouldn't argue. And I mean, the majority of people just want to make a decent living. So they want to get their degree, they want to get their piece of paper, and they'll do whatever they have to do to please the professors to get that. It's a sad a sad thing, but the modern university is not a place where a great deal of real intellectual debate is going on, where professors are being challenged. It's a rare student that has the courage to challenge the professor, and a fairly rare professor, I would say, that has the courage to allow that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sound immodest, but I did encourage my students to criticize me and question me, and I was always willing to debate and anything I said, but I don't think that was terribly common. Having said that, I did have wonderful students. And yes, I do see some signs of hope. I had a student, for example, who ended up going to a college in Boston. I'm trying to remember which one. I think it was Boston College, actually. He did a master's in publishing there. And he has since set up his own publishing house. And just this year, he set up his own bookshop. A very, very interesting young man, actually. His name is Tyler. I'm not sure how you pronounce his second name. Houth, I think it's pronounced. Very interesting.
Best of luck, Tara. Best of luck.
Yeah.
If she is listening to us, best of luck. She deserves. And sorry. And also hats off for you, because you left the university and you wrote a wonderful satire. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly. Satire.
Yeah.
Satire. And again, I know Garry and I are friends. We are not making a secret of that. But I recommend everyone who is listening to us to read that book, because you might not agree with everything that is there, but you're gonna have a great time, because it's really, really fun. You love from the beginning to the end. You won't be able to make a pause, because you want to see what's happening next page or next chapter. So it's really, really engaging. I think it's one of the better constructed novels that I've read maybe in the last 2 or 3 years that were written, let's say, nowadays. So I really recommend, and I'm going to try to put some links when I publish this podcast in YouTube.
Thank you. Could I show the book to viewers?
Sure.
So that I whoops, hold on.
If you can move it there.
That's it. Our parent
who
art in heaven. Yeah.
And the cover is fantastic. It's fantastic. The
cover illustration was done by a friend of mine, an old school friend of mine, actually, Nick Ward, who's an author and illustrator himself, and a very talented guy. And I told him I was looking for a cover, something like the covers that were common in the 80s, when satirical novels were really all the rage. People like Tom Sharp. There was a big fashion for sort of campus novels at the time, humorous campus novels, and I think he really did a fantastic job.
He did.
Of the cover, yeah.
If the cover is 5 stars, then your writing is I don't know, 9 or 10.
Oh,
so
thank you.
was the novel written in the US, or were you already back in Portugal?
No, I was. Well, yeah, I may have.
Or half.
Yeah, I think I actually. I'm trying to remember. I think I started a draft while I was still in the States. Yeah, I did. I think I started it in about 2016, but I didn't really write it till I was here in in Portugal, which was actually better, I think, because it's better to get a little bit of distance. I mean,
Yes.
again, not that this is pure autobiography by any means, fairly obviously, I think, but again, it's sort of based on my concerns about academia and cancel culture and so on. Yes.
Yeah, I fully subscribe that idea that you need to build that buffer between yourself and the reality you are writing about, because otherwise it's too hot. It's and you are not really ready to portray it. To be too present. So there must be some gap between you and the stuff you are writing about. But on the other hand, I don't know about you, but I found quite challenging to write in Ireland and in Portuguese. So I do write in both languages. I started, I think, 3 years ago. But I find it easier to write in Portuguese when I'm in Portugal and to write in English when I'm in Ireland, or maybe from in the States to be the same. Do you face similar challenge, or it doesn't really interfere with you?
No, I don't. I don't have an urge to write in Portuguese. Actually, I speak fairly good Portuguese, but I don't feel I have the mastery of the language I need to write creatively, really.
But is it easier for you to write in English when you are in England or in the US? Or it doesn't make any difference? I know you were also in France in a literary residence last summer.
That was only for a month.
I'm not asking you to write in French.
No. But
was that an obstacle, the fact that you were surrounded?
Not at all. No. I mean, I think that there is an advantage to being in the country where the language is spoken as a native language, because you're getting, how can I put it? You're just in a very rich linguistic environment.
Yeah.
So the fact that, I would find when I was living in the States, for example, I'd often hear a word in conversation or on the television, or a word I read in the newspaper, or a phrase that I would think, that's the exact word I need for such and such a situation that I was writing about. And of course, when you're in Portugal, that's less likely. I mean, it's a bit more likely now because we have podcasts and so on. I think we're more connected now than we used to be.
Or you can always move to the Algarve and then you can listen to English pretty easily. Not sure if you're going to find the right mentors for your writing, but still.
But I would like to have more of an English-speaking community. Actually, I think that's beneficial for you as a writer. I mean, if you're an English writer, yeah.
So at the moment, I can see you are putting a lot of passion into Substack. You're probably posting every week, or
every week,
2 weeks, every week.
No, every week, yeah.
I think that's a great frequency. Again, I'm biased. I'm following and liking and sometimes writing my comments on your articles. They're all very interesting, and I can see a lot of Nietzsche in your writing, not only in the style, but also in the ideas that you present to the reader. And for me it's fascinating to see Nietzsche being brought to the arena of ideas. I don't think he is not that popular as he was maybe in the 90s, beginning of 2000s. I think Nietzsche was. Well, I'm very much into rock, like your son, and Nietzsche and rock really got together when it comes to culture. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was huge. So it's amazing that you are bringing him to the attention. Can you tell me a bit more about your profile in Substack?
Yeah, sure. Well, the Substack is called Write Dangerously, which obviously is a sort of parody of Nietzsche's phrase "live dangerously," and the idea obviously is that writing that is safe and conformist is boring. My idea is that good writing is writing that takes risks. It may be writing that fails. Failing is an important part of writing, as Samuel Beckett, the Irish writer, always said. But I think you have to take risks, or you simply end up repeating what other people have said, and that has no interest. Apart from that, I suppose the blog is about writing, but it's not simply about writing. It's a blog that deals with the intersection of writing, culture generally, philosophy, and politics. Politics, not in the sense of party politics. I'm not really terribly interested in that, because I think almost all of the traditional parties are corrupt and incompetent. But
which is again a Nietzschean idea. Nietzsche
yes,
was always keeping himself distant from the political grounds, and he had his thoughts and views, but he will never mingle with the politicians, which probably resonates with you.
Yes, but I think that I think that not enough writers are dealing with the very critical cultural issues we are facing, and I think that most writers have sort of surrendered to a very conformist ideology, actually. And some of them believe in it genuinely. I think when they do, it's generally because they don't really understand the ideology that they've subscribed to fully. They don't understand its intellectual roots, its postmodern and neo-Marxist roots. I think some writers are simply afraid, and they know that if they keep parroting the dogmas of progressivism, then they will be accepted by the tribe, and that's really all they want, is to be accepted and gain a measure of success. But because of that, I think we're getting writing of increasingly poor quality. Not just writing, I mean, all of our culture, actually. It's the music, the painting, the films, everything, really. It's very obviously deteriorating. And, some of my friends have said, "Oh, you're just becoming a grumpy old man. That's what every old man says, that it was much better in my youth." But I really don't think so. I think I'm open-minded enough to appreciate good contemporary things when they come up. For example, I'm not one of those old guys that only listens to music he listened to when he was a teenager. I've heard music made in the last 20 or 30 years, which I really like. I've certainly read writing by young people that I've really liked. So I don't think that is a prejudice. I feel that the culture is in decline, and there may be nothing we can do about that, but I think at the very least we can be aware of it and try to resist it in the sense that we at least try to create true culture. We don't just become herd animals, in the sort of Nietzschean sense, just conformists who are
and just or just consumers and we don't know what we are putting in our body, soul, and brain. We are just being fed. We don't care about what is the spoon, who cooked the soup. Just digesting it without knowing what we are taking in. And that's wrong by definition. And it doesn't matter what kind of thing is being or what kind of thing are we taking in. We should always have some criteria. I think it's a matter of establish, what is quality, what meets those standards, what doesn't, and not just obey, which we really would annoy Nietzsche. So I think, I can totally resonate with that ideas, and I can see your tribe growing on a weekly basis. There are more and more people there. I think Substack is also growing as a writing app. I use mostly a Medium and Substack. They are very different, and I'm aware of that. So I'm not a different person, but I can see the direction it's going. So maybe the digital world is a good platform, to inspire others to take the lead, to share what we are not able to in other places. So I think it makes sense to invest some time there.
Yeah, I do too, and I've been quite encouraged because the Substack is growing. I mean, every week, pretty much, I get more followers. So, I mean, it's still very small at the moment, but I've in the last 6 or 7 months, I've got about 120 followers.
That's
good. That's still very small, but I mean, about 50% of them are actually opening and reading it each week. So, I mean, it's still tiny, but I'm getting engagement too. People are liking the posts, they're commenting. So yeah, I hope that something will happen there. And it's not just self-promotion. I mean, of course, I do want to draw attention to my work, but it's not that I'm promoting myself. I'm really trying to create some kind of community.
Yeah, I think there is some service about what you are doing. So, and it's not only serving yourself, but also giving a hand to others. Like I went through this, and maybe something that you should be aware of, or think about writers from the 18th, 19th century, or opening up different avenues. So I think it's very, very valuable, and it's good that the Substack is growing. And you're talking about followers and engagement, which some people tend to think is the same, but I think the real benefit of platforms like Substack or Medium for that regard, and probably YouTube, and I'm talking on those versus say Facebook, Instagram, maybe Twitter, though I'm not that big in Twitter, is that the people who are following in Substack, they are really following. They probably read your stuff. they probably think about what you just mentioned in those paragraphs. They might write a comment. Where there's Facebook, it's very easy just to follow that person. Then you might come across a couple of posts on the beginning because you just started to follow this person, but then it will be on the side, and you are still there as a follower, but that's it. You are just a number. You are not really someone paying attention. So I want to highlight how, and I'm not like being paid by Substack or anything like that. It's really the case that when you build a community in Substack, it's a tangible community. I'd say out of 100, at least half of them are reading it. Probably not every week, but almost.
Yeah, and there's no question. I mean, probably most of the best writers actually have a Substack now. It's becoming really important. I mean, I follow Elif Shafak, for example, the Turkish writer who lives in London. She has, and she's quite politically different from me, I would say, but an interesting person and a very good writer. Also, I've encountered lots of interesting people on Substack. So yeah, I think it is a good platform.
It's also network, I would say. You mentioned this thing of following or be friends or peers with others that we don't necessarily agree with. Let me just share something here that, and going back to your book, the Stoning the Devil, I remember at some point one of the characters, sorry, is describing what the Israeli Defense Forces did in Lebanon. My views on Israel are public. I consider myself a Zionist, and probably that book can be seen as a pro-Palestinian book, and that didn't interfere with our friendship. So we are still in the podcast. So I just want to tell others it's possible to disagree with someone and still be friends and invite them to your podcast. So that's possible. And I have to say, the previous guest is typically someone supporting the Israel incursions, whether it's in Syria, Lebanon, or Palestine, but he is not that much. He's not that supportive of what's happening now, and I still have it. So it's those things can happen, and I hope people can take that as an example of mutual acceptance. That you can have your own views and talk to someone who thinks different, and that's how you want to expand your horizons. Otherwise, you just end up in an echo chamber. So I want to finalize with that. The two of us could be here talking forever, as we know, but let's close by now. I really enjoyed talking to you. It's always a fantastic pleasure. The door is open, so I hope I can have you at some other stage. And I wish you all the best.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say thank you very much. I've enjoyed it too, and I just wanted to say that everything you were saying there about having different views, I agree with that very, very strongly. I feel that if there's a way forward for our civilization, it has to admit of different opinions. And for example, if I can just briefly say, some of those views I expressed in Stoning the Devil, or it was not really me, actually. I mean, they were my characters. They were Palestinian characters, but I would probably have modified some of those views. Actually, I mean, I don't want to get into the present Gaza crisis necessarily, but I've certainly changed some of my views. But even if I hadn't, I am very willing to debate anybody who is willing to genuinely debate me. I think we're losing that, and I think that we should be able to discuss things with people who have very different views not only without deciding that they're necessarily stupid, but particularly without deciding that they're necessarily evil, which is an increasing tendency these days. People tend to think that people who have views different from them are bad people. And I think we have to, if we want democracy is really about the ability for each citizen to give his or her own views freely, without fear of censure. And once we lose that, we lose political freedom, and we lose all the benefits of 2,500 years of Western culture. So, I mean, it's absolutely critical. So I very, very strongly agree with you there.
And likewise. And I would also add that it takes courage to disagree with your previous self, as you just did, and in public. Most people are not willing to admit that their opinions, 5-10 years ago, are not the same that they hold in the current in the current day. And you had again this bravery, going back to Nietzsche, to say, these were my views, this is what I expressed. I don't necessarily agree with some of it these days, but that's just fine. We need to overcome who we were, otherwise we'll never develop. So also debating with the person you were in the past, and understand, okay, I was this individual because I experienced X, Y, and Z, and now that I went through A, B, and C, I'm able to see things different, and that's just fine. And just assume it without just being stubborn and stick to what you always said and proclaim, just to sound confident. And you won't sound confident; you will just sound a fool, and that's not not our interest. So, I hope the audience can take a lot out of it. And again, it was like fantastic pleasure, as I said before. And thank you very much, Garry.
Thank you very much, Vitor. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, take care. Bye. Bye-bye.